Chicago, we need to talk because there is a storm brewing on both sides of the football. And if you are a Bears fan, you better sit down for this one. What's up, everybody? Fave here, back with Faves, and today I am diving into two stories that are colliding at the perfect moment for this franchise. On one hand, you've got Caleb Williams sitting down and getting brutally honest about the year that nearly broke him. On the other hand, you've got a monster in Tampa Bay named Vita Vea who might, and I mean might, be available, and if the Bears front office is paying attention, this could be the move that turns Chicago from a team that's on the rise into a team that nobody in the NFC North wants to see on their schedule. Buckle up, because we are going deep on both of these. And by the end of this video, you're going to understand exactly why I think this offseason is shaping up to be the most important stretch in this franchise in over a decade. Let's start with Caleb, because before we get to the defense, we have to talk about the guy who's actually going to be slinging the football. Caleb Williams sat down recently and opened up about his rookie season in a way that honestly surprised me. This isn't a guy trying to spin a rough year into some fairy tale. He said flat out that he's happy he went through it, and when you hear him explain why, it makes total sense. He talked about getting hit 68 times last season, the third most in the entire league, 68 times. Think about that for a second. That's not just uncomfortable. That's a guy getting physically punished on a weekly basis while trying to learn the most demanding position in professional sports. And instead of making excuses, Caleb basically said that year taught him what it actually takes to survive in this league, mentally, physically, and yeah, he even said spiritually. That's a mature way to look at a season that a lot of quarterbacks would rather forget. He brought up something that stuck with me, quoting his teammate Case Keenum, who apparently told him the bad times make the good times feel so much better. And look, I don't know about you, but as a Bears fan who has watched this franchise search for a franchise quarterback since prehistoric times, I need that mentality from Caleb. I need a guy who's not rattled by adversity, who takes a beating literally and comes out the other side saying, "I'm glad that happened because now I know what I'm made of." That's the kind of quote that either ages beautifully or gets mocked in 3 years. And I'm choosing to believe it ages beautifully because everything else Caleb said backs it up. He talked about the mental side of it too, the sheer amount of information a rookie quarterback has to process. The blitzes, the fronts, the protections, the checks at the line, all of it hitting him at once in year one. And he admitted there were moments he felt overwhelmed, which honestly good. I don't want a rookie quarterback who claims he had it all figured out immediately, because that's usually a red flag that he doesn't actually understand how hard this game is at the highest level. Caleb owning that struggle and then talking about how things started to slow down as he got more comfortable, that's exactly the development arc you want to see. Now here's where it gets really interesting for Bears fans, because Caleb spent a good chunk of this conversation talking about his head coach, and he did not hold back on the praise. He called him the best coach he's played for, someone who knows both sides of the ball, inside and out, offense and defense, and can answer any question you throw at him. If you know anything about Ben Johnson's reputation coming out of Detroit, this checks out completely. The man built one of the most explosive, most feared offenses in football with the Lions, and now he's got Caleb Williams, a former Heisman winner with rare physical tools, running his system in Chicago. Caleb even said he fell in love with staying at the facility until 9 at night last year just to figure out the offense, and then going out on Sundays and actually executing it. That's the kind of quote that makes you feel good about where this thing is headed. He also touched on something I found fascinating, which is his own mechanical kryptonite. His words, not mine. He said his biggest challenge is staying balanced in the pocket, not falling off what he called the mound, like a pitcher losing his mechanics. Growing up, Caleb always wanted to be able to throw accurately from any platform, moving, off script, creating outside structure, because that's the special sauce that made him a number one pick in the first place. But now, working with his throwing coaches, guys like Will Hewlett, Tom Housley, and Chris Hess, who, by the way, also works with Josh Allen, Caleb's trying to find that balance between staying disciplined in the pocket like a more traditional passer while not losing the improvisational magic that makes him who he is. That's a real tightrope to walk. And it's honestly one of the more encouraging things I've heard, because it shows a quarterback who's self-aware enough to know exactly what he needs to work on instead of just assuming his talent will carry him. So offensively, I like where this is trending. You've got a quarterback who took his lumps as a rookie, is working with legitimate mechanics coaches, and is fully bought into a coach he clearly respects and trusts. That's the foundation. But here's the thing about foundations in the NFL. They don't win you championships by themselves. You need the other side of the ball to hold up its end of the bargain, and that brings us to Vita Vea. Let's set the scene in Tampa. Head coach Todd Bowles was asked directly this week whether he's worried about his star nose tackle holding in during training camp, and Bowles basically shrugged it off, saying it's part of the business and they've been through it before. Translation, there is a very real contract situation brewing with Vita Vea, and the Buccaneers organization knows it. According to reporting out of that same media availability, insiders are saying Vea wants a new deal, and if he doesn't get one before training camp opens, it would not be shocking to see him show up, hold in, and then sit out reps until Tampa makes it worth his while financially. That's a real storyline, not speculation on my part. That's coming straight from people covering the team. Here's why this matters. Vita Vea is entering the final year of his current contract, and he's set to make $17 million this season. But here's the catch. None of that money is guaranteed. When you combine a lack of guaranteed money with a player who is one of the most dominant interior defensive linemen in the entire league, you've got the exact kind of situation that creates drama. Add in the fact that Tampa Bay also has to work out a new deal with Baker Mayfield, and you've got a front office that has some very expensive decisions to make with limited cap space to go around. The reporting suggests Tampa's plan is to try to lock up Mayfield first, then pivot to Vea, but that's not a guarantee, and it's definitely not something Vea himself has to just sit back and accept. So what does any of this have to do with the Chicago Bears? Great question, and I promise I'm not just randomly connecting dots here. If Vita Vea's situation in Tampa gets messy, if the two sides can't come to an agreement, general manager Ryan Poles has to at least pick up the phone and ask what it would take. Now, let me be crystal clear about something before I get ahead of myself, because I don't want to be one of those channels that turns a hypothetical into a headline. Vita Vea is not a free agent. He is not on the trade block. There has been no official report of the Bears pursuing him. This is a scenario, a possibility, something worth monitoring, not a done deal, not even close to one. I want to say that loud and clear because I take it seriously when I tell you guys what's confirmed versus what's speculation. And this one is firmly in speculation territory. But it's the kind of speculation that makes too much sense to ignore. Think about what Vita Vea actually does on a football field. This isn't a guy who's going to rack up 15 sacks a year and get all the highlight reel glory. His impact is different, and honestly, it's more valuable in a lot of ways. He eats double teams. He collapses the pocket from the interior. He shuts down running lanes before they even develop. When a nose tackle that size and that powerful is planted in the middle of your defensive front, it changes how opposing offensive coordinators have to scheme against you. Do they double him and leave one-on-one matchups elsewhere? Do they try to run away from him and hope the rest of the defense doesn't rally? There's no clean answer, and that's exactly the point. Now picture that kind of presence next to what the Bears already have up front. You've got Montez Sweat coming off the edge, a legitimate speed rusher who can win one-on-one. You've got Grady Jarrett, a veteran presence who's still bringing pressure up the middle. You've got Jervin Dexter continuing to develop and grow into a bigger role. Now add Vita Vea to that mix, and suddenly you're talking about a defensive front that can genuinely bully opposing offensive lines. That's not hype. That's just basic roster construction logic. When you stack that much talent and size on the interior and the edges, offensive coordinators run out of answers fast. And let's talk about why this matters specifically for the NFC North. Because this division is not messing around right now. Detroit wants to physically overpower you up front. That's been their identity for years now. Green Bay wants to win with timing, rhythm, quick strikes in the passing game. Minnesota wants to stretch you vertically and create explosive plays down the field. You know what disrupts all three of those approaches? Interior defensive line dominance. A player who can blow up a play before it even has a chance to develop, forcing second and long, third and long, panic throws under pressure. That's what Vita Vea does, and if he's ever wearing navy and orange, that's exactly the kind of disruption this division would have to account for every single week. Here's my personal take on all of this, and I know some of you are going to disagree with me in the comments, which, hey, that's what makes this fun. I think Ryan Poles has to be aggressive here, but smart aggressive, not reckless aggressive. You don't blow up your cap sheet or mortgage future draft capital for a 31-year-old defensive tackle, no matter how good he is. But if Tampa Bay gets to a point where they're willing to move on from Vea rather than pay him what he wants, and if the asking price is reasonable, the Bears have to be in that conversation. This isn't about rebuilding anymore. Chicago is past that phase. This is about building a complete roster around a young quarterback who is clearly progressing. And you don't do that by only investing in the offense. You do it by giving that quarterback a defense that can win him games on nights when the offense isn't clicking. A defense that creates short fields, forces turnovers, and takes pressure off a young signal caller who's still growing into the position. And that's really the connection between these two stories. Even though on the surface they seem completely separate, Caleb Williams is telling us exactly what he needs to take the next step: comfort in the system, continued mechanical refinement, and the freedom to not have to be Superman every single Sunday. Vita Vea represents exactly the kind of piece that could help make that last part a reality. When your defense can get off the field on third down, when your defense can shorten the game and give your offense more possessions with better field position, that takes an enormous amount of pressure off a young quarterback. Caleb doesn't need to throw for 400 yards every week if this defense is doing its job. He just needs to be efficient, protect the football, and let the rest of the team do the heavy lifting when needed. Vea has also already won at the highest level. He's been part of a championship defense before, and that experience matters in ways that don't always show up on a stat sheet. Veterans who've been through a Super Bowl run understand what the standard actually looks like on a day-to-day basis, how to practice, how to prepare, how to handle the grind of an 18-week season plus playoffs. If a player like that ends up in the Bears locker room, even for a couple of years, the value isn't just what he does on Sundays, it's what he brings to the rest of that defensive room every day of the week. Now, I want to be fair here and mention the other side of this, because it's a legitimate question whether Tampa Bay would even entertain trading him in the first place. Vita Vea has been the identity of that defense for years. Trading him would be a significant, potentially franchise-altering decision for the Buccaneers, and there's a real chance this entire situation resolves itself with Tampa simply paying the man what he's asking for once they sort out the Baker Mayfield situation. Front offices generally prefer to keep proven championship caliber players in-house rather than let them walk or trade them away, especially when that player is still performing at a high level. So I'm not sitting here telling you this is happening. I'm telling you it's a scenario worth watching, and if the situation in Tampa deteriorates the way some reporting suggests it could, Chicago needs to have already done their homework. So where does that leave us? On one side, you've got a young quarterback who took his rookie year lumps, learned from every single one of them, and is now working with a coaching staff and a head coach he clearly trusts and respects, refining his mechanics and building real chemistry within the offense. On the other side, you've got a potential opportunity brewing in Tampa Bay that, if it plays out the way some are speculating, could hand the Bears a chance to add one of the most disruptive interior defenders in football. Neither of these stories is finished being written. Caleb's development is going to play out over the course of this entire season, and the Vita Vea situation is going to depend on decisions being made in a Tampa Bay front office that Chicago has zero control over. But if you're a Bears fan, and I know most of you watching this are, these are exactly the kinds of storylines that should have you excited about where this franchise is headed. This isn't a team just hoping to be competitive anymore. This is a team that's building something real on both sides of the ball, and I, for one, am here for every single step of it. All right, Chicago, that's what I've got for you today. Caleb Williams growing up right in front of our eyes, and a Vita Vea situation in Tampa that could turn into something special for this defense if the front office plays its cards right. Let me know down in the comments, would you actually pull the trigger on a Vita Vea trade if Tampa makes him available, or is the price tag just too risky for where this roster is at right now? Smash that like button if you want to see this defense turn into an absolute nightmare for the rest of the NFC North. Drop your honest opinion in the comments because I read every single one of them. And make sure you're subscribed to Favs for more no-filter Bears news, breaking updates, rumors, and analysis you're not going to get anywhere else. Bear down. I'll see you in the next one.